Alright, this is going to be a little short video. What I have here is the, again, FWB124, and I promised that I'd try and set the camera up and shoot a few things, you know, while I'm doing them in the shop. And I also want to put up content, you know, that's not you know, something rehashed. It's like there's things that I do in the shop, you know, machine work, or you know, just stuff that's been done to death on YouTube, with everybody, you know, putting up videos, you know, how to thread on a lathe, how to parting on a lathe. You know, there's stuff I think about putting a video up, but I'm trying to come up with, you know, something unique, not something that's been done before. And so anyway, I'm getting set up to do there's a step that I do when I work on the 124s, where when they come in, one of the first things I do is I hold it up to the light and I look with the receiver perfectly straight. I look to see if the barrel's pointing off to the left. It's fairly common that, you know, and this isn't something that was done after the fact. At the factory, the forks are spread open slightly, and I typically see anything from about 10 to 20 thousandths open on the front. And with the if you're familiar with the 124, they have a flat shim on one side, and then they have a little Bellevue washer. It's a spring washer is what it is. And the flat side is what determines your barrel alignment to the receiver. There's so little contact on that Bellevue washer because the cup face goes in, and you got the very small contact out on the end. So the flat side determines the angle of where the barrel's going to be going. If it's, when they sprung the forks on this receiver, if it's sprung on the right side, it typically doesn't affect the barrel alignment very much. If they sprung it on the left side, then, and you'll see this if you look at 124s, you know, whether you're at a gun show or whatever, you pick them up, you look, and it's extremely common that the barrel will be pointing off to the left. It's somewhat of an issue if you're, you know, long range shooting. I noticed a long time ago on these that, you know, you put a scope on it and you're shooting at different ranges, and you know, all of a sudden it's like, you know, the further out you get, when you get out to 50 yards, you're considerably off to the left. Your groups are all off to the left. Well, it's because the barrel alignment is off. So I measure these, you know, if it looks like it's off. All of them are sprung a little bit. If it's sprung on the right side, it's not so much of an issue if you're leaving it the way it is. But when I do it, I get rid of the Bellevue washer and I make a Delrin insert to go into the pocket on the side of the breech. That, and then make it an exact precision fit. Typically you see 750 thousandths at the base of these, right at the very base of the forks. As you go up further, that's where I'm talking about they're spread out, and you got to determine which side it is. You can do it with a square. You can take a 3/4 750 thousandths dowel and stick it down in there and hold it up to the light, and you can see light off either side. But usually before you tear it down, if you look, you can see if the barrel's pointing off to the left. This particular receiver, it was only off about 10 thousandths, and the right side is is bowed out about 10 thousandths. When you tighten everything down and it pulls against that flat washer, this one wasn't so much of an issue. But that's not the norm. Most of the ones I see come in, it's the left side that is tweaked, and you get barrel alignment issues. Anyway, I'm just a couple little things on here. I'll take some little short clips showing that. I use wood blocks on an arbor press to come in here and tweak it to get it back, and I just measure it until we come back to an exact 750 from the base all the way forward. That tells you both the forks are then in alignment with the face of where the breech sits. Anyway, this is not something I've seen anywhere else anybody talk about, although it's a very common problem. So anyway, I thought it'd be worth setting the camera up. I'll try and get some good footage, but this, like I had said in a previous video, setting up the camera and trying to get footage of, showing light coming through the forks and determining alignment. I can tell you about it. I could show it to you if you were here in the shop, but getting it on camera is a totally different thing. I've already tried to take a few measurements and everything, and it's like about half the footage I've shot so far hasn't come out well. But anyway, I did want to get this content up, just kind of show you a little bit. If you've never looked at this, or and if you got a little lathe or something like that, you can make your own washer for the side. I use Delrin on these. Just anyway, hope this helps. I'll try and get the glare out. Okay, about slightly over 750, and that's what you see on most 124 bases. If you come out here to the end, you'll see it opens up almost about 10 thousandths. It's not much. I've seen some of them that's almost 20. Not much movement. Buddy. Okay. At the base, we're right about 752, and right at the tip, we're at 752. All right, these are the, I make these up in advance. I keep a handful of them here. I'm about halfway through my stash, but anyway, I just make these little washers, and fit right into the breech groove right there. I just reused the factory steel one on this side. It's a very shallow groove. You couldn't get away with. You could, but I just use the factory's hardened steel washer. That gets rid of that Bellevue washer and allows it to, when the forks are perfectly straight, to have both sides of the breech holding it in alignment. You get a lot more positive lockup and less chance of the barrel, wiggling around. You're basically, one side's flat and the other side's mounted on a spring. That'll lead to, it can move around. Spring, that's what a spring does. It collapses and expands. The Bellevue is very, very strong, but it still lends itself to being less accurate than just having the breech perfectly straight and precision fitted washers in there. Alright, I just decided to bring, now that I've got that in place, you can see the factory steel washer. This is not the final assembly. I'm just showing that once that breech is perfectly straight on both sides, and you get that washer made to a very exacting fit. See, it doesn't just flop in, but it's a very precision fit, and there's no chance of it wiggling side to side. Anyway, hope somebody finds this beneficial. I may mention a little something about breech seals here in a second. Alright, I'm going to pop this breech seal out. You just come right up under the bottom. There's a little empty empty pocket. I'm hoping it'll focus. Right at the base, you can just slip a little small screwdriver up and pry the breech seal out. One of the things you notice when you start, if you've ever rebarreled a 124, the barrel is pressed in place and it has a pin right at the base of the breech, and that's basically to it's a press fit, but that's the securement where it can't move at all. I'm getting a little tongue tied. But one of the things you notice when you're rebarreling one of these rifles is this looks to be just a straight slot that the O-ring fits down in here, and they vary a little bit, not much, 5/6 thousandths, but you do get some of them where you get the standard breech seal put in there and it protrudes real far out the face, and people have issues with barrel alignment. They put a new breech seal in here, then all of a sudden they've got immense amount of droop. Well, getting back to the machining, it looks like a straight slot, but it's not. When this barrel OD is turned, and especially right back here at the very tip, or at the very back end of the barrel, it's actually dovetailed. It's not straight. If you're looking at the side of this barrel and this breech wasn't here, it doesn't come perfectly straight. It's actually got a slight taper to it. So when the O-ring goes down on there, it can spring down and hold down, and that groove holds it in place to keep it from falling out. It's a really good design. But if you have one of these rifles where you got that variation where you got too much seal overhang, what most people do is they want to sand on the face. They want to take sandpaper or whatever they want to use and grind on the face of it. There is a groove in there that will allow it to sink in a little bit. What I do, and this will allow you to not, if you take off of the face, you're basically, the rubber has a little bit of memory, and it's always going to want to return and everything. If you take off of the face, as that seal sets down into that groove that's on the inside, it'll get too short, and then you start getting leaking. People constantly complaining about, I changed the breech seal 5-6 times on my 124, and after X number of shots it starts leaking again, and I just keep changing seals. What you don't need to do is take off of the face of the seal. There is a little groove that will allow it to relax and go to the inside. So what you want to do is, if you've got a little wooden dowel or plastic or whatever that you can slip that O-ring over Put it in an electric drill. I do it on a lathe. I got a little jig built up. This one doesn't really need it turned down. The seal fits fine, so I don't really have a good opportunity to show that. I'm not going to film it. I'm just going to tell you about it. But take off on the OD of the seal. Do not take off with the face. With the face, if you take off with the face, as soon as that seal settles down into that groove and kind of forms to that dovetail in there, it'll be too short. It's why people keep having issue after issue after issue. But if you put the O-ring over a dowel, just take a little Dremel with a drum sander on it, and I typically only take about 10 thousandths off the OD, 10, maybe 15 thousandths. When you snap it in, you still have the full thickness of the O-ring bearing against the face. It'll get rid of the barrel droop and allow it to close completely up and the seal to compress, but you're basically giving it room to compress and expand while not compromising the thickness of the seal. I say a lot. I'm sorry. That's how you get a long-term fix for breech sealing issues. I may go into the another thing you run into on 124s. Yeah, I quit saying the lug at the base of the receiver right here. That actually is what's supposed to determine your barrel alignment. The breech has a ledge on it, and it's supposed to bottom out and sit on this right here. One of the things that I've noticed over the years that you run into is this thing's mounted on a pin that presses down into the receiver. If you were to look down the 4-inch screw holes, you can see the back of this pin where it's pressed in there. And I've seen people replace the factory screws. They get boogered up, whatever. They replace them, and they get some that are too long, and they really start cranking on them, trying to keep the stock tight. You will actually loosen this up, and this lug can get loose, especially if you got screws pushing one way, and then you got the barrels when you close the barrel. Some people flick them pretty hard, and the two opposing, one's on one end of the lug and one's on the back end of the lug, and because of those two, it'll eventually deform the hole that it's in, and it'll start wiggling. You'll start getting a vertical stringing on a 124. So one thing you don't want to do, you always look at the end of your screws when you put them in and make sure they're not bottoming out at the on the base of that lug where it presses in. That can cause some accuracy issues as well.